Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Kerstin Forsberg, and I'm a biologist and social entrepreneur from Peru. I'm founder and director of the nonprofit Planeta Oceano, which focuses on engaging people in marine conservation. And I also have the honor to be an MCAF Fellow, a Marine Conservation Action Fund Fellow at the New England Aquarium. So I'm really excited that you can join us today, and I'm really excited to share our work in Peru regarding giant manta rays. And I know that it is a challenging time for all of us across the planet. So thank you very much for taking the opportunity to come with me today to this virtual visit. And I'm really excited to welcome you, even virtually, to Peru and to meet the giant mantas that we work with and especially the people that we work with. So I really would like you to take the time to think about all the people that I'm going to talk about in my story today. So with nothing else to say, let's get started, and please dive into the northern Peruvian waters together with me. So here we are in northern Peru in Tumbes, and we are diving with a giant manta ray. Also, its scientific name is Mobula birostris. And giant mantas are magnificent. For me, they're really magical. You can see it as if it's almost flying through the water, flying through those rays of light under the water. And once it comes around, you can see its little spots or ventral patterns, which is unique to each individual. Here you can see some remoras or fish that are swimming together with the giant manta ray. And the manta ray is really curious. It will come up to you, it will look at you with its huge eyes. It has a very big brain, and it's one of the most, it has the largest brain to body size ratio known for sharks and rays. Now, a bit more about these gentle giants. Apart from their huge size, so there's been cases in which there's been mantas measured from wingtip to wingtip in over 9 meters of length. And they feed exclusively on plankton, which are these very tiny microscopic microorganisms or organisms floating around in the ocean. So they'll open their mouth and they'll filter feed. The plankton will come in with the water, and then they'll expel the water through their gills, and they will end up eating loads of plankton. So this species is migratory. There are 2 identified species of mantas in the world, and the mantas that we're talking about today are the giant mantas. And they are migratory, but they have been known to have fairly restricted movements. So not moving too much like across the world, but it's fairly restricted in one certain location where their population is going on. So just to give you a very brief overview, I might be talking later today about the devil rays as well. They're cousins and part of the same genus as the giant mantas, but the devil rays are much smaller. So you can see that these are going to be smaller, and the giant mantas are going to be, as I said, the size of 5 meters from wingtip to wingtip, or 6 meters. That I know that there's some kids out there listening. So that might be like the length for a 9 meter wingtip to wingtip might be like the length of a full car, for example. But what's the difference between the giant mantas and the devil rays? We have the position of its mouth. So the devil rays, apart from being smaller, will have its mouth on its tummy, on its kind of on the ventral side, on the side where the belly is, and the mouth of the giant mantas will be between their cephalic fins. They also have loads of teeth. So they have teeth only on the lower jaw, and they can have up to 3,000 teeth. So apart from the mantas, I want to introduce you to the place where we're working on. This is Tumbes, northern Peru. It's bordering Ecuador, And it's a really important area. It's a tropical area. It hosts the largest marine biodiversity in Peru. And it's also home to hope spots like the Tumbes Chocó Magdalena biodiversity hotspot. Apart from mantas, we can see loads of different species. So you can see whale sharks, you can see sea lions, you can see humpback whales. These are all different species that we've seen when we're out in the Tumbes waters. But something that I really want to bring attention is the people in Tumbes as well, and how the environments are shared with so many fishermen, shared with people, shared with all of us, really. So I really want to think about the people of Tumbes as we move forward with this story. And we couldn't do that without first talking about history. So these are pre-Inca ceramics that were found in different excavations. And you can see clearly with the cephalic fins that are here, the different rays that the pre-Incas were seeing or were valuing in their pre-ceramics. For some reason, manta rays were somehow forgotten and they were no longer valued by the Peruvian culture after these times. So I first got to Tumbes in 2007, and I started working with a sea turtle project that engaged over 100 local volunteers. And many of these volunteers were patrolling the beaches, finding sea turtle strandings. And the interesting thing here was that the volunteers would also bring their families. So they would bring their aunts and their mothers and their brothers and their sisters. And so this little group here, I want to pay attention to their little faces of the same kids here, because you'll see them later on in the story. But while I was working with communities in northern Peru, working with sea turtles, engaging with fishing communities, we came across this site. And this was actually a photograph given to us by a fisherman called Pablo Ruiz. And he would mention that he and his family would go out and they would intentionally capture giant manta rays and they would harpoon them. And what was worse is that they would find giant manta rays, some of them that were pregnant. And so that is a big challenge for us because giant manta rays are considered vulnerable worldwide. In some cases, up to 80% of the population has decreased. Worldwide, it's thought that 30% of the global manta ray population has decreased. And why is that? For several reasons. This is a video of a giant manta ray that was captured. It was taken by a production company, a film production company from France that came over to our project. Here, the fishermen are actually bringing back the manta ray that was incidentally captured out in the Tumbes Sea. And this manta was a pregnant female. So manta rays take very long to reproduce. They have one pup each 2 to 7 years and can reach age of maturity between ages of 7 and 10. So if they're reproducing really, really slowly, that means that they are very vulnerable to decreasing their populations through capture, either intentional capture or incidental. And we'll talk about that in a while, incidental and capture and bycatch. So basically what happens is that we have a species that reproduces really slowly. In addition, it has typically small populations. So it is known that populations are between 1,500 and 2,000 individuals in some cases. And so if the population is really small and it can't reproduce, and they're obviously capturing pregnant females, then the population is at real jeopardy. These are the devil rays that I had mentioned previously. And devil rays have very, very similar threats and biological characteristics as giant mantas do. They reproduce slowly. They are also, in some cases, vulnerable and with different threats to extinction and threatened by fisheries. In this case, in Peru, they are fairly captured in large numbers. on this, based on the vulnerability of giant mantas and mobulas, and based on the incredible population that we were seeing, we were researching giant mantas together with local fishermen, together with local volunteers. We were patrolling different fishing sites to understand how many manta rays were being captured. We developed this proposal to protect giant manta rays, and we handed it over to the government in 2013. And meanwhile, years later, 2 years later exactly, after we had presented that proposal, fishermen captured this giant manta ray. It was lifted up with a crane, and it came over news, and you can still find it if you want to Google it. Giant manta ray captured in Peru. You will find it there. And this news became viral. And what was worse is that people really didn't know about giant manta rays. As I said, when we were talking about the pre-Inca ceramics, people had somehow forgotten about giant manta rays. So you would see people saying, oh, wow, this is a monster. This is, maybe it's a dangerous animal, or manta rays are weird and rare to see in Peru. But what we decided to do was share the opposite story. So we had a lot of media communication and attention, and I just had a notification on my cell phone today that these photos were exactly 5 years ago, so 5 years ago from today. And so we started talking and saying, you know what, we have been studying this species. It's not rare, it's not harmful, it's harmless. And we were probably in front of one of the largest populations of giant manta rays in the world. And why is that? Because the giant manta rays that we were finding were likely to be shared with our neighboring country, Ecuador. And in Ecuador, manta rays had already been legally protected since 2010. And the researchers there had noticed that it was probably one of the largest population of giant manta rays in Peru. So if we were sharing that population, it meant that in Peru, we had the largest population of giant mantas as well, but they were unprotected, and they were exposed to intentional fisheries and to incidental fisheries, or bycatch. That meaning that the mantas were entangled incidentally in fishing nets and killed. So I want to share, I told you about the people of Tumbes, and I want to share you this photo that I really like, which is with the fisherman called Edgardo. And Edgardo is actually the fisherman that captured that giant manta ray that came out with that crane. And the manta ray got entangled incidentally in his fishing net, and he didn't know that manta rays were important for conservation, and that they were vulnerable, and that they were an incredible and majestic species. He thought that maybe he could earn a bit of money with that manta ray. So he brought it back, lifted it up with that crane, and really didn't earn a lot of money because, to be honest, the manta ray meat didn't have a high economic value. So he actually basically lost most of his work for that day because he didn't earn a lot of money for capturing that giant manta ray. So the interesting thing here was that we had volunteers at the time, and they approached Edgardo, and we invited Edgardo to join our initiative. And we said, what if we could start valuing giant manta rays alive rather than harvested? What if we could start bringing people to come swim with us with the giant manta rays, and also bring people to come research together with us, and bring the fishermen as leaders, as ambassadors, to work with us in this conservation project. So basically, what we have been doing since 2014 is equipping boats for fishermen, giving them training, and together with dozens of international volunteers and hundreds of local volunteers, going out to sea to search for giant mantas. And what we basically do when we go out is we patrol the area to see where we can find giant mantas, and we take coordinates. of where we're finding the mantas, and also information of the environment. Because what we want to understand is when the mantas are coming, how they're coming, why they're coming to Peru, and what can we do to conserve them. And if you're really lucky, you'll be able to see a giant manta ray breaching out of the water. These breaches are known to be it's not really clear what the breaches are the reason for the breaches for the mantas, but it might be that they're communicating, it might be in relation to their feeding, it might be in relationship to courting behavior. But if you're really lucky, you'll see them jumping out in the water. And remember that these are huge animals, right? So it's a majestic sight. Another thing that we do when we're out researching the mantas is we dive with them and we collect photo IDs. So these are basically, we're diving beneath the animal and taking an image of its ventral side of its tummy. And then each of these unique patterns are like your fingertip. So that means that each of these are unique. That way we can identify if an animal came back, if an animal is coming back at a particular time. And here I want to bring your attention to this. This is really challenging and harmful, because this is a fishing net that was caught between the cephalic fin of the giant manta ray. So you can also see through these photographs the different challenges that the mantas are exposed to. Another thing that we're doing together with volunteers and together with the fishermen is collecting information on zooplankton. I told you that giant mantas filter feed and they eat zooplankton. So what we're doing is we are together with volunteers, and we're working with Earthwatch volunteers that many of you might be familiar with, and we're collecting water samples of the Tumbes area. And then these images, they aren't this size actually, they're microscopic. So all of these have been exposed to microscope. And then we can identify what zooplankton species are in the area and what this relationship could be to giant mantas. So here's one of our volunteer expeditions, and we continue to do more and more expeditions. But as we continue to bring people out to the water to swim with the mantas and see with the mantas, there's one particular person that I would really like to talk about, which is this teacher called Vitalia. And Vitalia, when we did this, we did an excursion for local teachers so that they could go out and see giant mantas. And this is the manta fin out of the water. And she was so excited after a full day of trying to search for the mantas, looking through the blue ocean waters to see if they find any fins. And she had gone out to the boat. She had a knee injury. It was really difficult for her to get onto the boat, but she was really excited by the time she saw that. And Vitalia is part of a network of 50 schools that we formed in 2009 called the Marine Educators Network of Northern Peru. And their contact with nature helps them also incorporate ocean literacy and awareness and manta conservation awareness in schools. So we've been working together with schools, and schools have developed their own manta clubs, and kids have their own manta clubs to learn more about this giant and magnificent creature, but also to share more of its importance within coastal communities. One of the things that we do with schools as well is teach them about our research. So here we have a tag. This is called an acoustic tag. And we've been tagging giant mantas together with Stanford University with two different types of technologies, with acoustic tags and with satellite tags. And basically what we're doing is tracking their behavior and what they're doing, what depth they're going to, how far out they're going to. And we found even one manta that went really out, almost out to the Galapagos Islands. And what this is doing that we're really excited is in transforming schools and incorporating these issues within the local communities through schools and through youth as ambassadors and children as ambassadors. So now we have a really great project called Connecting Schools, in which we're working with schools from different places. We're going to start with the USA as well, hopefully soon. And this is in Ecuador, for example, and kids connect through online communication and teach themselves about marine conservation issues. So talking about kids, and I know that there might be some kids online today, and I really wanted to raise attention on that initial group of kids that I mentioned that started with their sea turtle project. They started when they were around 4 years old, and now Josue is the name of this boy, and his cousins, these girls that are here, they are 14, 15 years old, and they continue to be marine conservation ambassadors. They have their own ocean club, and they are actually changing behaviors and perspectives of their own fishing community, their own authorities. And so I really want to raise the attention on the power of kids to really create change for marine conservation. So we had been working for some years with giant mantas. I've mentioned the challenges that we were facing and also the needs for conserving giant manta rays. Finally, 3 years after we gave our proposal, the government also came on board. So as from 2015, the Peruvian government prohibited the extraction of giant manta ray and also its consumption, because most of the meat was being consumed locally, and so now giant manta rays are legally protected in Peruvian waters. And they're legally protected, and people have committed, many people have committed to protect them. Many fishermen are still engaging in our work and engaging to release. Many of them have released giant manta rays, but you can still find images such as this video. This was a giant manta ray that one of our volunteers went out to the ocean, and they found a net that was being pulled. It was a ghost fishing net. It was all there by itself. When they dived in, they dove in, they found that it was a giant manta ray that had been entangled with this ghost fishing net. And together with fishermen, they were able to release the giant manta ray so that the manta ray could finally escape. But things like this are still happening. And what I want to highlight is that it's not just about giant manta rays. This is a patch that we found of a lot of sea turtles together with a lot of trash that had come together with the currents, likely also killed because of bycatch. So bycatch is a really important issue. You can find sea lions, you can find, that's a leatherback turtle over there. And so one of the things that we are working on now is on how to reduce manta ray bycatch and bycatch for other species as well. So even though the people of Peru, of northern Peru, are committed to manta ray tourism, to manta ray research, even though the government is also now committed to legally protecting the species, and intentional capture and consumption are basically no longer occurring, bycatch, which is this incidental capture of accidental capture of the giant manta rays, is still occurring, and we need to find ways around that. So we organized this workshop last year to bring together people not just from Peru, but also from Ecuador, from the authorities to the fishermen to scientists, to start thinking about ways that we can reduce giant manta ray incidental capture. And I want to give a special shout out to Elizabeth Stevenson. She runs the Marine Conservation Action Fund at the New England Aquarium, and she was there at the workshop together with us in Peru, and MCAF has been an amazing and incredible support for all of our work. So just to finish off, something that really comes to mind for me when I talk about conservation is people. And even though we've progressed so far in conserving giant manta rays in Peru, there's a lot more to be done. And conservation couldn't be done if it's not working in collaboration with the government, with the local schools, with the researchers, having everybody really come together. So when I talk about conservation, it's really about that. It's about bringing everybody together. And I would really like the world, if I were to dream of a better planet with a better ocean, I would really think about a planet in which people come together to conserve our ocean, not just for the giant manta rays, but for our ocean in general. So thank you very much. I think now is a great time to have some of your questions, and I really look forward to hearing from your comments. I'm going to put my...
All right. So our first question is from Solomon, who asked, do we have a sense of how ocean acidification and other consequences of pollution are impacting manta ray populations?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Solomon. So first things first, I was talking with one of these film producers that came to our project a couple of years ago. And one of the things that they were really surprised with is the fact that we all love marine creatures like giant manta rays, right? But it's really surprising how little we know about them. So there's so much still to be done within the marine science community, not just in Peru, but globally. So things that I can talk to you about is, for example, in terms of pollution, we know that these are filter feeders, right? So when we're talking, for example, about plastics, and we have plastics in the ocean that end up being microplastics or even nanoplastics, how much of this is being actually filtered in by giant manta rays? And once the manta rays are filtering in these microplastics or nanoplastics, what is the damage that is being occurred to on their bodies? So in many cases, like for many species, it's known in case of, for example, nanoplastics, that it can really alter even the biology and even the physiology of the individual itself. So there's a lot more to be done regarding that. And when we're talking about pollution, for example, in northern Peru, which is this area that I work in, you have different sources of pollution. You have pollution from like residual waters from basically urban settlements. You have different residuals from aquaculture that are coming in, from mining, from agriculture. So many that are coming into the water and that are definitely exposing the manta rays to that. So that's on one case. And in terms of acidification, that's a completely additional level, right? We know that acidification is greatly impacting many ecosystems across the world, for example, for coral reefs, for corals, and any change to the environment will change the behavior of the species within a population, of individuals within a population. So will that affect migration? Will that affect the ability of these animals to feed on? Will it affect their behavior, like their dives? There's so much questions that remain unanswered. So thank you.
Okay. 8-year-old Colby asks, what are giant manta rays predators?
Great, thank you, Kobe. So manta rays, they actually have predators which are sharks. So in some cases, you'll see giant manta rays with scars from shark bites, that they were survivals to shark bites. Or might even see a manta with like a fin that's like partially chopped off. But besides that, the fact that giant manta rays are so big and they're very fast swimming underwater as well, that size gives them protection from a lot of predators besides sharks. So if I would say besides shark as a natural predator, humankind, as what I was mentioning in terms of intentional catch and incidental catch, have been the largest predators for giant manta rays. In Peru, the story that I was mentioning, and luckily we were only facing local consumption, but there is a very big problem worldwide for gill trade. They trade the gills, the gill trade in the Asian market. So it's thought that, with no scientific proof, that these gills may be of medicinal purpose. And that has been one of the main and perhaps one of the sole causes of population main population decline of many locations worldwide.
All right. Margot asked, what role do manta rays play in their environment?
Thank you, Margot. Okay, so manta rays have a lot of different roles within their environment. First of all, as I said, they filter feed, they're eating plankton. So when they're consuming plankton, they're also controlling those populations of plankton. Remember that within each ecosystem, there's like a food web, and every different organism is connected. So somehow on one side, manta rays will be controlling some of the plankton in some places as a predator. Another really important role for giant mantas is that they have the capacity to connect nutrients from surface waters to the depth. So in some cases, we've been seeing giant mantas, for example, diving down beneath 100 meters of depth. So whatever they're feeding on the bottom, they're bringing up later to the top of the surface, or vice versa. Apart from that, I would really mention that manta rays are a flagship species. So a flagship species means that it's a species that can really lead to attention and therefore contribute to conservation of other species as well. So for example, in northern Peru, we've been working with fishermen, and the fishermen are really eager to protect giant manta rays. But because they want to protect giant manta rays, now they have also become more aware of sustainable fisheries and of respecting minimum size limits for fisheries. So mantas can be a really important flagship. And as mentioned also in our story, they can be a really important source for ecotourism and development in low-income communities.
All right. Let's see. Charlene asked, what is the gestational period for giant manta rays and devil rays?
Thank you, Charlene. So the gestation period is thought to be around 1 year. And bear in mind, I think I mentioned that they have one pup each 2 to 7 years, and they reach sexual maturity between the ages of 7 and 10. In some cases, they can have up to 2 pups. But typically what you will find is one pup, and that one pup, when it's born, will be pretty big. So the manta ray that I showed in our video that was captured and it had a fetus inside was almost 1 meter from wingtip to wingtip. That means disc width. And they're typically born over 1 meter wide.
Great. And I think a good question to end with is from Tim, who asks, what can we do as normal citizens to help?
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you so much for your question. I think there's a lot of things that citizens can do to help. And I'll try to give you a really short list. So first of all, it's supporting conservation organizations. For example, in the case of the New England Aquarium. So I know you'll see below this video a link that the New England Aquarium is doing to donate. And the New England Aquarium is a really big supporter for us. So donating to institutions like the aquarium or like your local nonprofits that are focusing on marine conservation. That is something that's really important. Another thing in terms of donating is donating time. So volunteering, for example. A lot of our work has actually been carried out thanks to support from local volunteers. And volunteers can do multiple things. Things like designing the graphic design of one of these, posters, to really conducting the research, just giving out your expertise and your time and your commitment. And apart from that, I would really say share the message. So sharing the message and keeping in mind that anything that we do as citizens impacts our planet. It impacts our ocean. The ocean is the planet's main life source. If we wouldn't have an ocean, we wouldn't even be able to live on this planet. So anything in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, of reducing our wastes and our plastic waste, and also sharing the word about the importance of oceans and the importance of manta conservation with our families, with our friends, with our peers, with our colleagues. Just broadening that network. If we're able to broaden that network, as you can see with these kids here and how we've been able to work with these communities, if we would do that same network globally, our oceans would be completely different. So thank you very much, and I invite you to join local marine conservation causes. And thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really exciting to talk to you from Peru, and please feel to reach out either to Planeta Oceano on our website or also through the New England Aquarium's site. And I know that we might have different questions that haven't been answered, but we really look forward to answering them on the post later today. So thank you very much, everybody.